change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, it's the Fundraising AI podcast. We're back for an episode. Actually, Scott, this would be a good quiz for you. Do you know what episode we're on?
23.
You did know. All right, 23. We're almost at a 24 here. We're episode 23 of the Fundraising AI podcast. It's so great to be here. And this is one of our favorite times when Scott and I can get away from just talking about random AI news, but actually get to introduce someone in the sector who is a thought leader, an insanely intelligent, bright, but also funny and I'd say humble. I don't know if Brian, are those words that describe you, with our guest Brian Gawor on this call. And we're just super excited to have you, Brian, to talk about applied AI and fundraising and all those things. So how far off was I in those words?
Well, I think I would say I've become more humble over the years. Raising kids helped that.
Sure.
So yeah, for sure. I don't know if I'm a thought leader. I just try to help charities. I try to be funny. I think I get that from my dad, but humor is always good in the nonprofit space, especially when you're working in a space with limited resources and you're trying to change the world and banging your head up against everything from regulations to trying to get technology to work. I find humor to be pretty helpful. Did you know why the crab college had a horrible giving day? Because they're shellfish.
Because they're shellfish. See, being shellfish never gets you very far.
There's that humor.
There it is.
There you go.
Good start already.
I never understood why they call it fundraising. I mean, it's got the word fun in it, but, I spent 20 years as a fundraiser and, a lot of meaningful work, but, fun was maybe not the word I would use to describe a majority of my career.
Well, you're changing the world and it begins with fun, but it also begins with half you. So it depends on the day.
Wait, glass half full or glass half empty?
And I actually used that one earlier today with a friend. But yeah,
of course you did.
Keeping humor is good. And I think that's actually a crucial thing, I think, as people are thinking about adopting new technology. And adopting new technology is actually not always about the technology, as you well know. It's managing personalities and traditions and cultures and things like that. But the fabulous thing about our field is every minute we work, somebody who might not have had food has it. Opportunities are created. People get to go to school. Housing is found for the unhoused. I mean, no vertical can say things like that. I have a lot of friends that work in the financial sector that come to me and say, boy, how do we get into this world? So we should be grateful every day.
We certainly are. I mean, I always said, I spent 20 years in the fundraising side and I, could honestly say I felt like I never went to work. It's calling a nonprofit is a way of life, not a job. If it ends up being a job, you should probably get out of it because you're right. I mean, at the hardest days, you go home and put your head on the pillow and recognize that, you did a small little thing to make the world a little bit of a better place. And I had a lot of friends after grad school that would reach out to me. I'm sure you do too, where it's like, I'm in pharma and I'm making a lot of money and all these things, but like, I don't feel fulfilled. Like, how do I, feel fulfilled? And at that point, switching to a nonprofit career is pretty hard, right? You get pretty, trenched in and, the golden handcuffs kind of thing. So
yeah, I remember probably best stories I could tell about that. You want to talk to me about, to talk about my background, I know. But, my kids, it was always tough to explain to my kids what I did, right? And I remember coming home one day and I said, oh, Daddy had a great day. Somebody cried in my office. And it was, who's that? A donor. And I said, you made a donor cry? And I said, no, he was so happy he was crying. It was the first time he felt like he had done something in his life positive, right? Wow. And I'm sure every major gift officer out there or other types of gift officers have stories like that. I mean, somebody handing you a $500,000 check and they're crying tears of joy. The incredible experiences, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we definitely want to dive into this. And I will reflect on one of the first times I saw you present was at Giving Institute a couple of years ago. And you did a presentation. I'm sure you'll remember the title of it. But it was basically like the math of generosity or something.
Donation equation coming soon. We're working on it now.
Okay, so the donation equation. And it was so smart. I mean, really, I have the good fortune of traveling around and meeting a lot of smart people, but I looked at that, I was like, man, this guy really is thinking about things in very similar ways, but really had cracked the code on this and also made it digestible. So all that, let's launch you into this podcast. So we're so excited for you to be here. Been looking forward to this. So Brian, you joined Well, you actually had a long history in higher ed, and you actually just joined a new firm, JGA, recently. So tell the audience a little bit about your journey a little bit, where you're at now, and then I know Scott's going to grill you with like 100 questions, and test all your knowledge about the donation equation.
Basically, I'm going to start by saying I'm a first generation college graduate. Turns out, and I didn't necessarily know that because my dad, was in advertising, graphic design. One of the reasons why you have a blue mac and cheese box, going all the way back to corporate, craft and stuff like that. But a painter, but he didn't do a bachelor's degree because you didn't really need to. You just move forward with your creativity and your designing. He was a senior executive, and I mean, over time he changed and things changed like that. But he was actually born in England as his parents were moving across. I mean, really walking across Europe after World War II. I'm a first generation college student, a first generation American, and I didn't know that until after I graduated college. I didn't apply for anything. I didn't know about that, right? So I'm a kid of Chicago hippies, and I went to college, had a fabulous college experience, changed my life at Knox College, a national liberal arts college, where a bunch of cool people went to, and my classmates challenged me. I was on the path to kind of go into politics, and it wasn't a fabulous time to go into politics when I graduated. You may have heard a little bit about the history of Illinois governors.
Not like now. I mean, now is a perfect time to go into politics.
Yeah, right. So I'll give the answer that I'm trying to remember. A major philanthropist in the tech world, and I won't say the name because I'll get it wrong. Why would I take the demotion?
Right.
Like I'd actually like to accomplish something today. Yeah. The quote I've been using is that politicians are the problem. Anybody wants to call me and have a fun phone chat and challenge me on that. But, politics is, I think, polling just slightly above influenza with the American public.
We'll be putting your cell phone in the notes of the podcast.
But yeah, I mean, it's just so clear that, nonprofits and charities, we can get into that, are really part of the answer.
Yeah.
But instead, through a number of things that happened, I ended up staying on and working at my college. I was actually the housing director 6 months after I was in the residence hall. So that was fun. Nothing like busting a kegger after having gone to a kegger a few months prior. But there are a lot of positives about that experience in terms of being able to interact with students and help them along the way. So I did student affairs for a while.
Okay.
And then went over to the enrollment side. Ended up running the campus visit program and was part of a group of people that really helped transform that institution and put it in much better financial situation and actually help a lot of first generation college students afford and attend. Then went over to the annual giving side of that same institution. And after, I had been there working for 10 years, so I want to do this major gift thing. So I was privileged to be the director of development at Illinois State University's College of Fine Arts. A lot of famous alumni, the alumni that founded Steppenwolf Theater, great artists, visual artists, musicians as well too. Site of one of the largest marching bands in the history of the U.S., a Big Red Marching Machine. So gained a lot through that experience as 4 years. And then just because I needed to move, I basically was faced with a transition. And so I became a consultant and was hired by a large tech and services firm to basically do benchmarking and data analysis. And I had access to an incredible quantity of data in terms of donor response, and then helped the consultants there craft solutions for mostly higher education institutions, and then do marketing, start my own podcast, do all that stuff. So I became the giving geek. Mm-hmm. I am not joking when I tell you that is my actual license plate. I'll send you a picture. It says giving geek on it.
That's amazing.
And I drive it around. And that's where some of that stuff with the donation equation came from, because I had to transform from being a frontline fundraiser to saying, what can we learn about how and why people give to charitable causes? And much of the work that you two have done, right? Just trying to understand this so that we can help nonprofits. What I say is really maximize the joy of giving. You can really fall down this trap of saying, well, how are we going to get more people to respond? How do we increase our fundraising results? Most of those conversations are fundraiser facing.
Yeah.
So a key thing we have to do, particularly with AI, is be thinking in donor facing and human facing terms, right? So I was proud to do that. And then more recently, just about 4 or 5 months ago, moved over to JGA, which is an incredible organization that just builds consulting on authentic human relationships, much smaller than some of the other places that I've worked before. An incredible team working with them, and a little bit of a broader view of nonprofits. So it's not as much higher education, although plenty of higher education clients. And then I'm actively engaged right now in part with Donor Search, with several solutions that use predictive analytics to really kind of serve up in a very low friction and high impact way to fundraisers who they might have more success reaching out to, and then getting into psychographic personas, which we'll probably talk about a little bit, which is a heck of a mouthful, but basically saying, what is this donor's not so much category, Leibunt, Seibunt, business college grad, event attender, but their flavor. Like how do they see the world, and how do we approach them about the joy of giving in a more interpersonal way?
That's awesome.
I know. Is that a good description?
Yeah.
So I'm super dork. Like you guys, I'm a super dork.
I definitely want to get into that psychographic information, but you, like all three of us, actually, we started in nonprofits, then we went over to the consulting side. So what do you miss about being a nonprofit, and what would you do differently after having done consulting for so long if you were to go back now?
So I'd say number one, direct donor contact, right?
Yeah.
And almost in the same way that as we get older, we miss having younger kids. Like you look back in your life and say, I should have valued that time more. I have many great memories with my kids. I should have valued my time in college more. The direct donor contact is 100% the thing that I missed. And so I often really work hard to get the organizations that I work with to just talk with me about, so like, what are your meetings like? And they'll say, well, we did an agreement. No, I say, what was it like? Because I do miss, that direct side of it. Because actually, even in what we would say mass response fundraising, there can be a lot of individualized donor contact.
Sure.
And so I would say I don't think I could do what I'm doing now in as emotionally intelligent a way if I hadn't had that experience. But direct donor contact, you just really can't beat that.
Yeah, I would say the positives outweigh, or the negatives outweigh the positives. I don't know which one it is, because I was just at lunch today and someone from a higher ed institution and was like, hey, would you ever go back? And I was like, before I could even I'm like, no. I do miss the donor contact for sure. Like in, having those real authentic relationships and being able to walk alongside someone and help them fulfill their philanthropic dreams and ambitions and make change in an organization. I think that what some of the challenges were for me in nonprofit is I'm a very entrepreneurial person. I'm an early adopter, and the slowness to adopt and the barriers that I think many nonprofits create for themselves is something that keeps me up at night. And so,
most charitable organizations behave like they're invincible.
Yeah.
And it's really only until recently, and let's just say the words generosity crisis, how many times I've held up your book in meetings, right? I mean, until recently, it was statistically valid for a higher education institution, for a major charity to behave like they're invincible, because honestly, they don't close, they don't fall apart. It's super rare, right? But what we're seeing, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these things, is trends that are changing, right? So that entrepreneurial side and getting it. Now, I think one of the best things about it is getting both like being a frontline fundraiser, being at an institution, but having connections and networks of people who have larger data sets and larger technologies. I mean, John List from The Voltage Effect, great quote, you can only change the world at scale.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of our responsibility as consultants and tech providers and data entrepreneurs is to keep that in mind. Like, we are trying to change the world, right? And it may be a soft nudge, a hard nudge, opening a door. But I think if we can, the future, I hope with AI, is that we can combine that personal relationship and that changing the world at scale. That's where we're going to have success.
Absolutely.
Would you see yourself as an early adopter? Like, are you always jumping into new things as soon as they come out and troubleshooting? Yeah.
Well, so I have two things. I like to jump into new things, but then I'm Gen X and I'm deeply Gen X. So like anything that's popular, I don't like. So like the initial, ChatGPT thing was like, no. And then I had this friend, my friend Chad Vonneker, who got me into Midjourney. He's a real expert at it. And I started to turn the corner. And then some people know I wrote this article where I asked ChatGPT how you run an annual fund, and then got people together in a room and said, this is what ChatGPT, it was an early version, this is what it said. But the people that I had in the Zoom were like probably half or more of the writing about annual giving, like in the market. So like, it was this hilarious moment where like, oh my God, that's me, right? Am I out of a job? Now we're not, right? But yeah, I mean, yes, generally I jump into new technologies pretty quickly. I'm a deeply Gen X skeptical. Like the instant something becomes popular, I'm like, nah.
It took my wife is not an early adopter at all. She hates anything smart home related. She was actually the one who got me into ChatGPT before she tried it out before I did.
It's cool.
And I have to carry that with me from here.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Because Scott will try new things to his own detriment repeatedly.
Oh yeah.
Like Kickstarter, whatever it is, it's like, I'm going to have it. And, and then it's just, he constantly lives in this state of disappointment, which is what you get. And I used to be that way too, like with every beta. And I'm like, why isn't it working? It's because I had the beta. And then I've become a little bit more, I don't know, sensible, I think, with over time. So going on to that, I'm really curious, Brian, because so glass half full or half empty when it comes to AI transformation in the fundraising area.
So I'd say my spin on that is the glass is rapidly filling and you better know where to put the water. So you can be glass half empty, you can be critical, and we do need critics and people who are watching. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but it kind of doesn't matter. So, I mean, I'll invoke Tom Hanks' recent quote just a few days ago at the D-Day commemoration. He was asked, are you concerned about the future of democracy? And he said, I really believe that when people are given the opportunity, they're going to move in the right direction. So it's kind of interesting because I would say, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was one of the potential early adopters of Facebook. And way back when with Facebook, the idea was you would actually send them your student directory. And I said, as a student affairs professional, heck no. Because I could see, particularly with what I expected to be the treatment of women, that it was not going to go well, right? Now, I was like, this is a dumb idea, right? Now, obviously, I was wrong on that one, right? Having said that, we were not present and critical and thoughtful when social media launched.
For sure.
And what's fabulous about fundraising.ai and the professionals who are taking a critical look here is it looks like with AI, in the AI world, like people are actually seeing this start critically. I would say it's moving super fast, so we're not able to be quite as critical. I'd have to think a little bit more about the recent Apple integration and how I really feel about it. I get a little bit of a pass because I don't have a Pro. So I got maybe a little bit of time on that, but it's moving pretty fast. But we're actually a little bit more critical than we were when social media was rolling out. I think when social media was rolling out, we were just so excited.
Right.
And social media has had some astronomically negative effects on young people. I believe that it's done really negative things to the state of men. I don't, that's 6 podcasts. We were to schedule.
So to summarize that, before I know Scott wants to ask another question, you're basically saying it doesn't matter because it's here, right? And it's going to continue, whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about, AI is going to influence things, it's going to be here regardless. It's inevitable.
Yeah. And what we have to do is we have to put all the positive critical energy we can into it to make it go right. So I'd say whether it is objectively one thing or another, operate as though it's a glass half full and find ways, particularly at the donor excitement and engagement level, to connect.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah. And I think with the social media example, like there was nothing prior to that in the digital age that we could look back and say, oh, this went horribly wrong.
Right.
So now we've had to suffer through that, right? Some more than most. And we're saying, let's really kind of pause, pump the brakes, and think about this thoroughly before we just jump into adopting it.
Yeah, I mean, going back to social science research, the arrival of television changed mass human brain structure.
Right.
Social media has changed mass human brain structure, and AI will do the same. The question is that can we harness that for good? And I believe the answer is yes. I see examples of it every day. There's also all kinds of things that I worry about.
So
ask a generative AI about race, about religion, about some other things. You're going to get some interesting answers.
Yeah. Especially depending on the tool you use. We've talked about many of those gone wrong in past episodes. So using AI for good, in all the work you do with clients, where do you think like the easiest use case is to jump in and say, here's how you can do it for your work and to see an impact?
Okay. So I would say there's probably 3 kind of key things. The first is on the predictive side. So you can use the word predictive analytics. That's rapidly becoming a more AI driven process. But saying, can we look at as many potential incoming data points as we can and identify the donors who are telling us through their behavior, through their preferences, through their watches, through their clicks, through their engagement of all types, that they're ready for a deeper relationship and for our outreach. So that one, of course, will focus fundraisers' efforts because it's limited resources, and every minute spent by a fundraiser is a cost to the cause, right? So focusing our efforts, but more importantly, I wouldn't expect if I all of a sudden got a bug about like European history, and then I watched a bunch of stuff on Netflix, and the next day suggestions didn't come up about European history, I would feel weird. right? So we're rapidly approaching the point on the predictive level where donors are psychologically trained to do things and then
Expectation.
see things change,
yeah.
right? So like when you say like, oh, glass half full, half empty, we got to get on this, right? The Netflix queue, Spotify suggestion, world is here, and it's not even generational anymore. When we look at the statistics, even about boomers who are still with us, there's just an expectation that predictive side is going to serve up opportunity.
Yeah.
So I would say then saying, what does that on a generative side tell us about that person's worldview or personality or preferences? Are they more of an innovator or a collaborator? Are they, particularly cause driven? Are they impact driven? Right? That's the psychographic side of things. And then finally saying, well, now you have generative AI tools where, okay, well, you've determined that this is the right person to contact and they're really innovation focused. You have this appeal letter or this appeal email or this meeting request note that you send a donor telling a generative AI, can you make this a little bit more about innovation? Now, I would recommend not then cutting and pasting what it tells you and sending that to the donor,
Right.
but saying, what new words that I hadn't thought of? I wrote a blog recently where I needed an additional P word.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out the P word. ChatGPT figured it out for me in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. And so, just helping create new ideas and new ways to interact with donors, but absolutely based on what we're seeing in terms of their interaction and engagement.
Yeah. Scott,
And I'm a super dork, so I hope that wasn't super dorky to people.
well, I mean,
We love super dorks here.
Yeah, you're in good company. Yeah, we wear the
Nerd tribe.
nonprofit nerd, shirt proudly. I think it's everything you're saying. I'm like totally right on. I love, starting with predictive. Scott and I have talked a lot. We've done a lot of webinars on this idea of like, generative AI without direction is like a ship without a compass. It's just going to create more and exponentially more, and it's going to be very easy and it's going to sound impressive, but it's going to be directionless. But the advent of precision philanthropy is where you take that predictive power and you add it to the personalization power that generative has. And it's just like, oh my gosh, all these like opportunities open up. So I want to reflect on this and I'm curious your thoughts on this. And Scott doesn't even, I was on a call earlier today, about 8 people I really respect, really, really smart people from around the world. And we're talking about the barriers of entry. And, one person started out with like, well, Salesforce had a report recently that only 12% of nonprofits are using AI, although something like 70-80% of them said that they saw how AI can actually help them. So there's this pretty big delta between like those that are using it, those that feel like it could be helpful. So what is the delta cause from? And the first person came and said, well, there's a fear of the technology and the fears around ethics, privacy, security, those things. I quickly jumped in. I'm like, well, I definitely believe that there's some fear, but how do you, the fear of change is also palpable. And you spent a lot of years in probably the most change resistant field on the planet, which is, an entity that invented tenure so that people can be untouchable. Like, it's a very unique, like higher ed organizations pride themselves on stability and lack of change, right? In some ways, like, because, it's just that bedrock of knowledge that gets passed on for generation after generation. Where do you think the delta comes from? Does it come from the fear of change, or does it come from the fear of the technology, and what kind of balance, or what are your just immediate thoughts? No right or wrong answer on that, obviously.
So higher education is a great example. And the fear of change primarily comes from the security and complacency of feeling like donors will always be there. And so actually, when we take a look at generosity to education, and you can, I think, start to insert healthcare giving has certainly increased, or some of the very, very large nonprofits, there's actually been a track record of donors always being there. That's changing. So donor behavior is changing. And so what I think is happening now is fundraisers are saying, we're seeing the denominator number, we're seeing the potential donor number. Like, I mean, I think everybody knows this. 90% or more of major donors have given multiple times before they make that major gift, right? So if you see a declining overall giving number, that starts to get scary and people, feel the need to change. Now, in large bureaucratic organizations, there's just negative inertia. So some of the best organizations that I've worked with, the innovation is actually coming out of a carve out within that advancement division. I said, no, you are actually very focused on innovation. We're willing to put resources here. Sometimes it's modest, but you're going to create change. Now, maybe 2 of the 5 things you do, we're not going to stick with, but that commitment to innovating and changing with donors. I think the other thing is the vast majority of our language and our processes in the advancement world is fundraiser facing. I'm trying to remember, I was at a conference at one point and it was one of our more endowed universities. And, somebody said something like, oh, they won't do that because of the prospect manager assignment system. And I pick on like institutions that have a lot of money because, hey, they have a lot of money. And I just said, well, sounds like you got a fundraiser facing problem. We got a lot of fundraiser facing problems. And while we are working through our fundraiser problems or not working through them, donors are innovating and changing the way that they adopt causes and create good in the world. Mm-hmm. We can't have that happen. So we have to match them. So it's like, I encourage every organization I work with to say, make a list of fundraiser facing terms or problems and donor facing terms and problems, and think very critically about what does the donor see. One of the activities I've done over the years is I've said, hey, everybody in the room, in the middle of a presentation, go on and try to make an online gift, right? And then the people in the room, like I've heard like obscenities.
Oh yeah.
At a case conference, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't even realize how hard it was to make their own online gift. I said,
right.
If you do nothing more today, go back and get that gift down to less than 1 minute.
Right.
One of the largest increases in donor participation or N count of alumni donors in the history of higher education was Virginia Tech over the last, it was 4 or 5 years. You could give in 28 seconds.
Wow.
Those things are tied.
Yeah, for sure.
Friction reduction. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Do you have a fun or favorite nonprofit use case of any tech or AI specifically?
So we did this really cool project with Sequoia, which is the aging organization here in Indianapolis, and they adopt the psychographic profile model. And everybody wants this, I'll send it to you, just email me. But they actually had an infographic of the psychographic models as a poster in their entryway of their advancement office. So they really bought into that idea of getting to know how their donors see the world. And I think that idea of thinking a little bit more about donor worldview has been transformative for them. So that has been really interesting to watch. I think the other thing is work with a couple organizations over the year and said like, hey, like all the research that I've done, different surveys that I did over my time as in research at the last company, gift officers really only see like 75 people a year. It just kept coming to that number. So I'm like, why do you have portfolios of like 400 people?
Right.
And then like invariably when they go into a portfolio, other engagement stops because they're assigned. Mm-hmm. Well, right. But you also know from your data that you're only going to see less than a fourth of them. Organizations that have come to terms with that and instead said, hey, actually, if I were to just focus on 20, 30 people, let everybody get the robust engagement because the data then will keep coming in. It'll provide them a great experience. I can actually pay better attention and amplify the joy of giving with these donors, especially if that can be done through the lens of predictive analytics. That's been really exciting and inspiring, and lots of cool stories of like donors that wouldn't have otherwise been engaged if that, I'll just invoke your term, precision philanthropy wasn't executed.
Yeah.
We just did a webinar with some of our clients who are using this, and the stories coming out. We learned so much from our clients because they are all coming in with their own perspective or their own experience or their own processes that they're trying to adapt with this new tool. So I love hearing that feedback. And that example you gave of putting up the infographic, like when you're trying to instill change management, having that marker or that trigger, like that constant reminder of like, we need to do something different. We need to think about our donors differently and start assessing them and meeting them where they're at. I love that example.
That's perfect. That was like my second problematic word. Like, I think most people know my super hated word is fundraising. Right. This idea that there's a separate engagement program for fundraising, right? Like, just so you all know, engagement is fundraising. Fundraising is engagement, right? But screw change management, just change.
There you go. Yeah. Change.
I know we've got to wrap up here in a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that we cover two more things. So kind of thinking about, the role of AI and basically inevitability of AI, in the world, personally, professionally, all those things. And being a nonprofit nerd, or what did you call it?
Giving geek.
Giving geek. What are the balance of things that like get you up and excited about in the morning, specifically to fundraising? And then are there any things that keep you up at night about the same type of technology and, where there needs to be a healthy balance between the two?
Okay. So I'd say, take a look at the trends, and we'll have Giving USA in, what do we got? Just under 2 weeks here.
Yeah.
I'll make a prediction. I think we're going to see a little bit more of the same in terms of trends. Look at the massive growth of donor advised funds, family foundations, giving LLCs, giving circles, collaborative giving. What do all these things have in common? People are avoiding fundraisers.
Yep.
Now, they're not deliberately avoiding fundraisers. People don't hate fundraisers, but the world is changing. And I would say the allegory here is to look at travel agents. And, years ago, you needed a travel agent to travel. Today, travel agents are concierges and more experiential advisors. They have access to networks and to things that you wouldn't be able to get through other ways. And that's a really crucial transition that we should be making on a technological and interpersonal level as fundraisers. So if what you're thinking is, all right, I'm going to send off this data and you're going to tell me who's going to make my major gifts, that's wrong thinking. The right thinking is to say, let's engage in a multi-tiered analysis enabled by AI, predictive analytics, and the best tools you have, making sure the best data goes into it and saying, where should we focus our efforts to amplify the joy of giving? And if you can go as far as to say, maybe we can even learn about how we might do that, that fundamentally changes. I mean, Nathan, your radical connection, right? And what it is now about is radical, tech-enabled, data-driven, low friction, donor joy enhancing connection. We have to start layering all these components in, and given the talent situation and our ability to hire people, keep them, just the people that are available, we are going to have to rely on tech as I don't always like to use military terms, but I'll say force multiplier. So really start to be thinking about how your technology amplifies your human capital and resources. If you think about it that way, instead of, well, we do this prospect research and this stuff comes back, that thinking, that fundraiser facing thinking is what's led to this problem. It's our opportunity now to innovate and make a difference. And what's incredible about it is that the companies that did that, I'm going to throw out a Netflix, I'm going to throw out a Spotify, I'm going to throw out the social media platforms that have been really effective. That's what they did. And that's why they have so much darn money.
Yeah. There's no doubt. I'm always so intrigued every time we have a conversation. I'm just like, never want it to end. Like every time we've had a conversation in a lobby of a hotel, I'm like, we just need to find more time together. And so with that, we actually found a time to spend more time together on July 11th in Indianapolis. And I wanted you to be able to just plug that for a second, because this podcast will come out in advance of people to be able to register. If you're in the Indianapolis and area, I don't know what that actually means. Just give it a plug for what's going on.
Yeah. So fundraising.ai, of course, has the great fall summit. And you had expressed an interest in doing more, in-person pop-up events. And we said from JGA, hey, we want to do that. So we actually threw out the resources as part of our sponsorship to do the Indy Summit, which will be on July 11th. It'll be in the afternoon. Nathan's coming down. We got 3 incredible hours of programming for all levels, like learning about what the AI is, right? Then talking about the ethical framework, getting examples from some nonprofits, even getting to the point in the afternoon where we're doing a hands-on experience with psychographic profiles, and then wrapping it all up with a great happy hour in a historic car museum. So downtown Stutz Factory, which is an incredible location in Indy, July 11th. It's free. We're covering everything. We'd love to have you down. So however far from you want to come, you can come, and you can actually sign up right over on the JGA website. And I know fundraising.ai will have information out about it. You should be able to get to it pretty easy, but right over on our website, jgacouncil.com, you can sign up, or just, grab it. Probably any of us on LinkedIn, and you'll see we'll have posts about it. But we're signing people up right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Scott, take us home.
Well, I'll be registering for that today. So thank you for that. I can't wait. Awesome. Brian, thanks for having us, or thanks for coming out.
I did feel like he interviewed us a little bit. So
I think
I'm not surprised by that, actually.
I think we might have to bring him on again to do it all over.
Yeah, I did have a podcast. Yeah, we picked like a more focused. We actually did. We should do tough questions. We did a couple conference presentations where we just did them as high school debates. We could have a lot of fun with that.
Oh my God.
But hey, let me thank you guys. Let me thank you guys in your organization. Let me thank Donor Search. Let me thank you both as thought leaders for attacking this issue in a really compassionate, emotionally intelligent, and strategic way, because this is our moment, right? Particularly in higher education, where we no longer have alumni participation as a kind of silly metric. This is our moment as fundraisers to take charge of this technology and make a difference. And it is going to be the fundraisers that do it in concert with tech firms and the innovators. But let's all take this moment and let's do it. Let's make this the positive story that we talk about in 10 years.
And thanks for joining the Brian Gawor podcast, because that was the perfect wrap up there. Well, this has been awesome. Scott, anything last words?
Yeah, just reach out to us on LinkedIn. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. If you like it, subscribe, share with your friends. If you don't like it, still subscribe. But
I mean,
don't
yeah,
email.
don't tell your friends and actually just email Scott. So there we go. We'll just go with that. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We are going to get back another episode here in a couple days. Brian, it's been awesome to have you. Thank you so much for jumping on here with us. We've got a lot of work to do together, and I think just people waking up every day wanting to move the world forward, one step at a time is what we've got to do, and I'm looking forward to doing that with you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian.